we're going to get painting real soon. Let's get busy and start actually planning our painting. It's important to plan it first. Here's one I prepared earlier. Never assume that your original photograph is the best possible take on what you're planning to paint. You can cut yourself some very high-tech paper viewfinders and you can use them to look at, maybe you want to crop in quite tightly, maybe you want a whole lot of space around your image. Your canvas proportion has to come into this too. If your canvas is square, then investigate square crops. If your canvas is long and rectangular, investigate long rectangular crops. I've got some tips and tricks I'm going to show you now, all about how to make this work more easily right from the start, so you don't trip yourself up on any of those silly little things that are easy to sort out right now. We're going to take advantage of a wonderful thing, and that wonderful and very simple thing is that, let's pretend these are canvases, and if I draw a line from corner to corner, what happens is any rectangle I draw that connects to that corner will have the same proportion as my original canvas. Same thing, here's a canvas of a different proportion, but so long as I include that corner, doesn't matter if it's big or if it's small, we can make that work for us. It's really important that we have a window around the image we've chosen so that we can use our analytical drawing techniques to transfer the image from our photograph onto our canvas. This is your first chance to start thinking about what attracted you to the image in the first place and what you're trying to say as an artist. You have to make that work together with actually getting this cropped in a way that works with the canvas that you've decided to use. I'm using this canvas. This time it's a 91 by 61 centimetre, and so to use my analytical drawing skills, I have to make sure that my viewfinders have about that same proportion. I'll show you shortly how to get it precisely right, but in the beginning, what you need to do is just estimate. It would be absolutely useless if I come in with a tight square crop, because that's not the canvas I'm working with. So I need to think straight up that I have a rectangle, and I need to decide, am I going to go long this way, landscape format, or am I going to go long this way? Because again, that's the canvas that I have right now. I'm thinking I rather like something like that. So maybe I want those wingtips in there, so I might just move up a little bit. And I think that's more or less correct. So I'm just going to tape that in place with some masking tape so that I can move on to the next part of it, which is to actually check that I have got that the same proportion as the canvas I'll be working with. When I was making these decisions, I had more in my mind than just the proportion of my canvas. Although that was pretty important, I was also thinking about compositional issues, and there's two main ones. So let's pretend that this is my canvas, and if I have a look at the centre of it, I want to make sure there's nothing there, no main element and no big gap either. if I also divide it into thirds both vertically and horizontally, then what I end up with is knowing where my 4 hotspots are. So if I can make sure that the thing I'm talking about the most, the focus of my painting, is in one of these spots, that's going to give me great composition. This is my subject, and so the decision I made puts the bird pretty much up here, and that suits me just fine. It'll give me room to play with, to maybe do some flight trails, but it'll give me a composition that is visually pleasing. Okay, this was our estimate. Now we're going to get real about it. So for these purposes, what I'd advise you to have is 2 things. So we want a black and white photocopy of your image, and we want a full colour version on glossy photographic paper, because if you have it just on cheap paper, you lose a lot of detail, and you don't want to do that. So however, for this, I'm kind of meeting you in the middle and doing it on a colour photocopy but on cheap paper, so that I can make a mark on that with charcoal, because the shiny stuff you can't really make a mark on. So with our estimate, the first thing I'm going to do is just mark this edge so that I can remember the decision that I made about my best idea of where it should go. And I also want to know just a couple of marks where I think that edge should be. And now I'm going to take that one off. So we have it looking like that right now. Now what I need to do is some actual measurement. So I'll get my trusty ruler, and I need to know that 13.7 centimetres is that distance across there. And I'll make sure, I've got it a little bit crooked, it's there as well. So I need to know that measurement. It was 13.7. That's not going to be right for yours, of course. It'll all be different. Now, I have my trusty ruler, yet another bit of high-tech equipment, and I need to use charcoal and give myself a diagonal on this canvas. It doesn't matter that it doesn't go all the way across. We're only going to be using that small distance. And my magical 13.7 centimetres that I measured needs to be transferred. Now, what I want to know is where 13.7 crosses this diagonal mark. I'm looking for this measurement here, and I'm looking to transfer that onto there. So that gives me about there. And I'm going parallel with this bottom boundary, and I'm going at 90 degrees to the side boundary. But there's my mark. So I can have just a strip of paper to make sure I know exactly where that edge is. And it can go down there. Now here's where the magic bit happens. I can figure this out now. This length here, I can drop my ruler on the ground and just be Gumby like I often am. Here's a spare I had put aside just in case. So if I measure this, again, parallel to this boundary this time, that takes me down to 21 centimetres. So if I go down here and find that 21 centimetres, it's right there. And it's off the page there. That's not terribly helpful. But that's okay. I can just wing that. And what I want is another strip to go across here. And I'll take that down as well. So now I have a window on here that is exactly the same proportion as my whole canvas. It's the same, this one and this one. Bingo! I'm going to be able to use my analytical drawing skills to get this image in that place on this canvas at the correct size. It is magic. What can I say? The question of what to draw on your canvas with. Willow charcoal is the only answer. So there's two kinds of charcoal you can get. There's willow, which looks like a willow twig, and there's compressed charcoal, which is usually available in more regular blocks. They often have the name embossed in the side. They're really, really black, and if you make a mark with compressed charcoal, it's not going to come off easily, whereas our good friend willow will come off with a wet rag. Sometimes people like to draw with a graphite pencil. That's great if you're working with oil paint, because the oil, the terps and solvent will dissolve the greasiness of graphite. Doesn't work with acrylic. The graphite just repels it and leaves a silvery mark on your surface. Watercolour pencil I've seen used. It's okay, except if there's any kind of red or pink in the watercolour pencil. It will very sneakily bleed up through your layers of dry paint weeks after you've finished your painting. So your construction lines will become evident, and there is not a single thing you can do about that. You're just stuck with them. Pastels can be good. They're sometimes a little bit powdery, particularly if it's a soft pastel, and that pastel might stop the acrylic paint from adhering very well. So for me, the answer is always willow charcoal. So you might think I've made a big fuss about paper viewfinders and it's all a bit unnecessary. I use paper viewfinders every single time I paint anything at all. And the reason for that is because if your drawing isn't up to scratch, neither will your painting be. It's worth taking the time and trouble to plan correctly and then to take the time and trouble to draw well. It's so much easier to move a charcoal line than it is to repaint a whole thing when it's in the wrong spot, a bit to the left. Analytical drawing is important, but it should never stand in the way of expressivity. Expressivity is your chance to start bringing yourself to your painting. For instance, you might choose to use jagged lines to talk about anger or to talk about quick movement, or I don't know, what else can you talk about with jagged lines? I'm sure there's a bunch of stuff. It's up to you. You can bring that, but your drawing has to be correct. If both my hands are the same size, however, one is closer to you, they're going to be different sizes in your drawn image. So that's not a distortion, that's just foreshortening. But you might choose to use distortion to increase speed and energy, or to increase the curviness of a female model, something like that. But you need to be in control of your drawing. That's why you need to draw well. So we're going to get busy with the wet stuff next. Should be exciting. Okay, let's get busy with some paint. Now, first up, we need to have some gesso in the colours, because gesso is primer for artists. Always make sure you don't put a brush into your pot of gesso. Doesn't matter so much if you have a smaller pot, but what a brush can do is introduce mould spores. And believe me, you don't want to smell rotten gesso. It's disgusting. So I have 3 little dishes here. I use china ones. And I'm going to put in some phthalo turquoise into one. And I'm going to put in some olive green into another. Now I'm aiming for mid-tone colours here. I don't want them too dark, and I want one to stay just white, so that'll take care of my light. Okay, so here's some olive green in this one here. And that's probably dark enough. New brush. Here's my phthalo turquoise. Now I've chosen these colours because these are colours that appear in our friend the rainbow bee eater back there, and because I know they work beautifully together. And another brush that's just for white. Don't need to mix that. Now what your brain is going to want to do looks a lot like regular, regular, predictable, boring, predictable, boring, regular. What I want you to do is a lot more like this. And even then, your brain loves symmetry. It's going to want to make splots of about the same size with about the same gap in between them. Your brain is not the boss of this. You have to get out of its way and be a little looser. Be a little more random about where you put the colours. You want the colours to be having a conversation with each other and get some blending and mixing happening as well. Truly, this isn't critical. It's your first layer. What you're doing is breaking the regular weave of the canvas. You're breaking the white of the canvas as well. And you're starting to talk about which colours are going to be in your finished piece. So you can, if you want to, start to think about things like, well, this canvas will be longwise and the top of the canvas will be further away from the viewer than the bottom. So you could do smaller marks there and bigger marks where it's closer, but really, it's not that critical. It's a first layer, people. Just relax, have fun. Let your colours be a beautiful symphony. Make sure that where you're painting doesn't matter in terms of getting paint all over stuff. You can't make anything without making a mess. Well, I can't. I'm assuming you can't. So you want to fill up all the white spots. You don't want any bare canvas left. How much or how little you blend it is all about the energy that you want in your finished piece. So if you want it to be very lively and energetic, you can leave it as rough as this, and that's fine. Let's say if you were painting a water lily pond or something tranquil like that, then maybe you'd want to blend it a little bit more. But for my purposes, and within my practice, I'm always looking for the most energy I can find. And so, might just tidy it up, bit of a lump there, bit of a hard edge. I think I'm just going to call that done. That's it. That's your first layer, grounding the canvas. We're done. This has been out in the Queensland sun for 15 minutes or so it's dry. It's important that it's dry before you keep going. One, you can't draw on a wet canvas, and for two, the next layer of paint is going to wrinkle up what's underneath. So make sure it's dry. If you're in a cold country, it's going to take a little longer. So I just need a really rough drawing. I need to know basically just where the body of the bird is, how that wing comes in, and how that other wing sits together. Might be adventurous and just think that the head's going to be there as well. Okay, that's enough. Seriously, don't waste your time doing a better drawing than that. All you need to know is where the thing is. You want to be confident to lose your drawing under what happens next. Don't waste your time. So what happens next is spatter. And we're going to mix some paint with water and a little binder medium so that we can drop some colour onto this surface. So we want about, I would say, a level teaspoon of colour. In again some china dishes. And For this part of the painting, it's lovely to use transparent colours rather than opaque ones, but it doesn't really matter. I'll be talking about transparency and opacity a whole lot later on. And some water. And we want it to be just a little bit thicker than milk. You want to make sure all the lumps are out as well. The lumps are not your friend. This is red gold. I use red gold a lot. So reasonably strong. We still want it to just run off the brush nicely like that. Here's a white one that I prepared earlier because frankly I didn't think me mixing paint was that riveting. So a little bit of binder medium in each one. That's because when you really dilute acrylic paint, you break down the polymers in the paint and you may not get adhesion that's as good as you need it to be. Now I've chosen these colours because I'm doing a rainbow bee eater and these are some of the colours. These colours also oppose what's already happening on the canvas, so they are across the colour wheel. The orange is across the colour wheel from blue. Now when I put it on, I want to make sure that I have my colours going on in families. What I don't want is wallpaper. I don't want an even smattering of colours because frankly that's boring and doesn't leave the eye of the viewer anything to do in your painting. So colours in groups, tribes of colours if you like. Families, groups, whatever word helps you remember. So I have my fan brush and if I hold it flat it'll hold a great deal of paint. If I tip it sideways that'll start falling off. So I'll hold it flat and my first drops of colour are going to be bigger. See how I'm not waving the brush around all over the place? I'm stopping it in space. That makes the paint fall off. So I'm going to make some families. I've made sure that I haven't got, for instance, yellow and then maybe purple because I don't want two colours wet on the canvas together that are going to make mud for me. Down here, at what will be the bottom of the canvas, I can have bigger drops of colour and then as my brush empties out, it'll make little ones. And so I'll make sure I have these smaller ones up here, more towards the top. I also want to make sure I don't leave out a big hole where the bird's going to be because let's face it, that's a pretty bad drawing. I don't know exactly yet, so I'm going to hedge my bets a little here. And the other thing I'm going to make sure I don't do is I'm going to make sure I don't avoid the edges of my canvas. So sometimes I'm going to spatter in a place that lets paint go right over the edge because otherwise, and this happens in class all the time, people end up with a very nice inch or so all around the edge that has nothing at all on it. So I'm still focusing on doing it in groups, little families of colour, focusing it mainly around the focal area of the painting, which is the bird, but letting some happen down here too. I love that sound. Paint hitting canvas. Bliss. And it's really important to always have white as one of your colours. And all of this lovely wetness will interact. The white will help us get a glow happening. And mess is more. More is more. More is better. Be bold, be brave. Remember I promised at the beginning I was going to help you to paint bravely? This is part of it. So that's looking pretty good. And now I have some combs. I'll show you how to make combs later on. These are pieces of ice cream container lid that I've chopped into, and you can use them to just get a little bit of movement here and there. Depending how finely you've cut your comb, it'll make different marks. I use them more where I'm painting with texture paste and combing that texture, but be daring. What can I say? Let's try things. Let's make stuff up on the run. It's how I roll. Okay, then this needs to dry. I'll be back. Okay, your paint should be dry. If it's not, put it back out in the sun and wait. Go and have a cuppa or something. You don't want wet paint on your charcoal stick. It'll stop it working. So it's important when you're doing your drawing to draw on an easel, because if you don't, let's say you have it on the table in front of you, you'll find that this part of the canvas is far, far away, and so it will look small because it's far away, and so you will tend to draw things up there bigger than they need to be. So that's foreshortening. We don't want foreshortening at this point. So always, always draw on an easel. Doesn't matter if you sit, if you put your easel down low, you can sit to draw, but have the canvas up in front of you. It's important too that pretty much the centre of your canvas is at your shoulder height, because easel fitness, turns out, is a real thing. If you're not used to drawing at an easel, you'll do it for a couple of hours and you'll find that your arm's in agony or you've hurt yourself in some way. Don't want to do that. Put on your supportive shoes, have your easel at a good height. Let's get all the problems out of the way to make this happen. Okay, now all of this that I did before, the paper viewfinder stuff, is to help us get the drawing in the right place on our canvas at the correct size that we've decided is where we want to go. So it's a lot of trouble. If you've skipped on over that and gone, I don't need to do that, just do it. Just do it. Try it. See if you can make it work for you. It's a little bit of work, but it's worth it. Now we're going to look for some analysis with our willow charcoal. So I need to get my brain in gear for this. Okay, drawing. Now, what I'm going to try and do is find the big things first. So one of the things I can see most clearly is this vector of analysis. There's an art term for you. That shows me where that wing is. So I'll see if the charcoal makes enough of a mark that you can see. Whoop. Get it in the right place, that'd help. So right across the front of that wing. See that gorgeous straight line that I have there? So I need to know where that sits in terms of this edge here. So let's say it's about a third of the way from the bottom, and I need to know where it interacts with that edge too, so that I can copy my thrust, my vector of analysis, onto this canvas here. So I'm looking for the spot about a third of the way up from the bottom, and I'll mark that. And then I'm looking up here, and I think it's about there. So there's my first line of thrust. And I know, I can see straight away that I had that slightly in the wrong place for my rough drawing. Doesn't matter. Now I'm going to look for a couple of other things. I need to know the direction that the body of the bird sits on. So I'm kind of looking for that shape on that sort of angle, yeah? So let's use a ruler again. I generally do this by eye, but just to make it clear, and you can use a ruler, it's fine. So this thrust here sits there. So I'm drawing this vector that's right through the body. It's like a knitting needle, right up the middle. I'm sure you can find a less disturbing analogy than that, but I'm going with knitting needle. So again, I need to move these marks, I need to locate them here. And I need to locate this one, it's a bit lower than there, it's probably about there somewhere. And then that'll be my analysis for the bird's body. Okay, now you don't want to do a whole bunch of analysis and have lines everywhere and then try and remember what the blazes you did. So a little bit of analysis and then try and get something down that actually looks like a recognisable thing. So I know if the body of the bird sits on here somewhere, then I need to know how long it's going to be. So what I'll do to find that is I'll look here. I might not include the tail, I think, in this analysis. So there's my oval, and there's the ends of it. So if I take a line straight up there, this is called a plumb line, this bit of analysis. And if I take another one here, see how I've found where those lines, those plumb lines, interact with my boundary, with my paper viewfinder. My paper viewfinder, of course, is standing in for the edge of the canvas. So here, I'll just mark halfway. So there's about the middle. You can measure those if you need to. So there's about my halfway mark, making sure I'm square on my easel. There's about my halfway. There's about where I need to pull down that line so that I can see the edge of the oval. That will be the body of the bird. And over here, there's the other one. That's very inconvenient that it's behind my picture. So it's here. So that tells me then that my oval needs to be on this line of analysis that I worked out before, this vector of analysis or thrust, whichever, and it's going to sit in there. And then the only thing I need to think about is how long it is compared to how wide. So if I drew it like that, that's not wide enough, is it? That poor bird's been starving for weeks. So I need to think about it and make sure I get it fat enough. And that looks about right, but it's only a charcoal line. If it turns out to be wrong, I can move it. It's well worth putting the energy into correcting your drawing, making sure it's right now when it's only a charcoal line. So much easier to move than paint. So I have some more analysis to do. I'll keep going with that. Brain in the right space, no interruptions, telephone off. Drawing's hard work, you know. Looking good so far. Okay, I've got the bones of that down now. I probably need to use some paper towel and just get rid of a few of these lines that were wrong or that were construction lines, because they get a little bit distracting. Now, the question of wings. The wings of a bird have two parts, and they have a little change of direction that I think of as the elbow. I have no idea what it might actually be called, but I think of it as the elbow. And it changes direction there, and there's often a little bit of a feather pops out there, which there certainly is on our bird. And the big flight feathers come all in towards that elbow. So they come in pretty much like this until you get to a point where you're at 90 degrees to this bone in the front of the wing, and from that point on they all just come down straight. Parallel, I suppose, is the word I'm looking for. This wing here also has an elbow, which is about there. And all of these ones, again, come to the elbow until the point when we're parallel to this bone, and then the flight feathers start coming down straight. Now, the shape at the bottom of that wing comes in here, and there's an armpit in there as well. I don't know, do birds have armpits? I'm assuming. So we're starting to get there now. I need to now start refining the drawing. I don't want to spend an enormous amount of time doing it, but I do want it to be right. Your painting can only ever be wrong in 4 places. That's line, tone, colour and edge. Line is your drawing. First one on the list, first one to get right. That's better. I tend always, when I'm drawing, to angularise what I'm doing, so to draw in straight lines. And the reason for that is, if you're drawing a straight line, there's not a lot of room for movement in that. It's a straight line. If you break your curves down into sections of straight lines, you have to make a decision about where they go. You can't fudge, you can't dither, you can't sort of chook scratch your way through it. You just have to draw a straight line. So I find it very helpful. That's looking fairly kingfisher-ish. I still need to find the wing covert there, because that's different kinds of feathers. It's not these big long flight feathers, it's little short ones, and so when we're texture pasting that will change. We'll use different methods of application of texture paste here than we will in here. That might be a nice place to put some stenciling, actually. That'll be exciting. Here, I think this is a little bit deep, that line there. And then we've got a shape here and a shape of different colour here. And that leads into that. Get rid of those lines too. I think that's a fairly convincing looking kingfisher, and that's enough detail for me at this point. A lot of things we'll be adding with paint. I've got the bird where I want it, the size I want it. Although, looking at the back of that head, it's a bit of a blockhead. It's always good to step back so that you can reassess things. And I missed a change of direction. It comes down like that. And it comes, there we go, not a fat-headed kingfisher anymore. Big improvement. Okay, that's the drawing. So I don't have to do any more to that. It'll be time to get busy with paint. That's exciting. Just make sure anywhere you have a whole bunch of charcoal, just bring it down a bit with the paper towel, and certainly do get rid of any lines you don't want anymore. A wet rag will take them off completely. So what we need is acrylic paint. And depending what brand you use, how old it is, all of those things, the thickness will vary. So this paint here is pretty right for what I need. I'm using a brush that's called a flat. It has a flat ferrule and it has a flat haircut as well. And what I want to do here is introduce some light behind the head of the bird, because the head of the bird will be a focus, and so I need to make sure in my focal area I have the sharpest lines, the biggest contrasts. At this stage of the painting, it's important to bring in more light than I think I actually want, because when we get up to the glazing part much later on, you'll find that it's really easy to make some things darker. It's really difficult to make things lighter at that part of the painting. So your brain once again is going to go, oh please, can I be symmetrical? No. We want excitement, we want energy, we want all the good things here. So I'm just going to come in with my lovely big brush. As a general rule, you always want to have the biggest brush you can for any part of any painting. So I want to leave some gaps in it, and I want to move quickly. Always when you load your brush, you will find that when it's loaded, when it's full of paint, that will make the biggest mark that it's capable of making. So because I'm trying to focus light around the head of the bird, I'll start my marks there. I won't start them out there and then try and drag them in. That wouldn't work for this. So start them in here and then give them a good drag out. I guess what you're trying for is that it's random within some quite tightly defined parameters. So it's only behind the head of the bird, but you do want some looseness in that mark making. An awareness of the direction of your mark making is very important. So I'm thinking that works pretty well. I might just pop in a little tiny bit of light back here as well. And maybe just a bit there. And I don't like that shape there, so I'll just cross it. Sometimes it's just all about your personal taste. So now I'm going to switch colours. And I have some phthalo turquoise, which is a beautiful, rich, dark turquoise. And then in the same dish, that's always good to drop your lids. Always put your lids on quickly with acrylic paint. You don't want paint to dry and get those nasty, crusty little bits around the edges. They'll muck up what you're doing. And I have some Payne's Grey as well. I use Payne's Grey a lot. So Payne's Grey and phthalo turquoise. So with my phthalo turquoise, I'm looking for these darks in here because I want to do some stencil work in there and I need to make sure there's some deep enough colour behind. So I'm looking for where this is darkest. And just knock it in. I'm really just trying to cover that big splot of orange that's in that dark area. I'm switching now with my dirty brush to Payne's Grey so that I can come in and get that shadow behind, and I can see that the feathers have a pattern that pushes up that way, so I'm just getting that in there. A little bit of phthalo turquoise again, still with my dirty brush. I do always want my colours to have a conversation with each other. This wing is darkest in there. The paint's being a little bit scratchy there. It's sitting on the top of the canvas, and so I'll just wet my brush and loosen the paint just a little with some water. With acrylics, you don't ever want to add a lot of water. It means that you dilute the polymers so much that the paint doesn't stick very well. If you do need it very runny, then put a bit of binder medium or flow medium in there along with the water. Okay, so dark in there, light there. That's about all I need to do at this point, because what happens now is going to be some stenciling. I love stenciling, it's so exciting. You'll be excited too. Let's have a chat about what we'll be using next. These little darlings are scrapbooking stencils, and you can purchase those in craft stores, online, or in actual shops. They're a very thin plastic, thin and flexible and washable. It's important that they don't fall apart when they get water on them. You can use plastic doilies too. You can even use fabric doilies, but I've found that these little things give me a much cleaner line. I spent so long trawling the internet for the patterns that I wanted, that I ended up buying myself a stencil cutting machine. And there's a lot of good ones out there. I have one that is a Silhouette brand, a Cameo, and it comes, you can buy stencil cutting material with it. You can also use a laminating pouch that's been run through the laminating machine and stuck together, so heated so it sticks together. That's a very economical way of finding exactly the plastic you need to make your own stencils. I like making my own because it means I can add some conceptual depth. In my stenciling layers, I can be talking about ripples and things like that. For me, I like that conceptual depth, but when you're starting, go and buy some. They're marvellous to have. I find the ones that I like best are just patterns. They're not specific things like butterflies or frogs or things like that. They're just patterns, and that's most useful for me. So, scrapbooking stencils, get yourself some. Get as many as you can afford. You're an artist. You can be creative. You can spend money on that. Okay. The product we're using is texture paste, and texture paste is a little bit like icing, really. It's nice and goopy and thick when it's wet, but it dries hard. It's an impasto medium, and so it retains its volume as it dries. It doesn't go flat like most acrylic paints do. Sometimes texture paste is called modelling paste or modelling compound. Read the label. What you want is one that dries matte, so not with a shiny surface, but with a flat, matte surface. Some of them dry more translucent than others. The one I like to use dries semi-translucent, so if you want it white, you have to add white paint to it. The whole point of texture paste is that we're raising areas to create pattern, to give the glazes later on something to work with. So, texture paste. You will need a lot of texture paste. Get yourself some. You will be needing some palette knives to manipulate your texture paste. You'll need some big knives. You'll need some very, very pointy knives. Maybe a little short, fat one like that. When you go to buy some knives, you'll find a thing. Now this is a mixing knife. And when I turn it sideways, see how it's just straight up and down? This one here is a painting knife, and when I turn it sideways, it has a cranked handle. That's to make sure that you don't drag your knuckles in the paint. when you're painting it. So don't try and paint with a mixing knife. It will end in tears. I know you can't make anything without making a mess, but hey, let's help ourselves out here a little bit. So, a selection of knives. The fancy ones aren't so useful. Work hard at finding out how you can work them. If you've tried some of those crown-shaped ones or serrated ones, or I don't know, there's so many of them out there. I've played with a few and I can't get them making anything I want. So if you've figured that out, for heaven's sake, shoot me an email that tells me how to do it, because it's a mystery. Knives like this are quite useful too, a long, fairly straight one. Most good art supply stores will have them. Word to the wise, I always, when I paint, throw my brushes straight into my bucket of water when I'm working, because it stops the paint setting on them. So that's great for brushes, but not for knives, because what happens is that nasty acidic water eats off all your lovely shiny stainless steel coating on there. So when you've used your knife, don't put it down dirty, don't throw it into your bucket, get yourself your little wet chucks cloth and just clean it off like that. That'll be a really good thing to do. It will preserve your knives, because let's face it, we use a lot of really low-tech stuff, but these actually cost a bit, so look after them. Okay, let's mix some colour. So, texture paste. Always put your lid on, because you don't want those crusty little bits around the side. You really don't. They're a pain. So I will put some acrylamide yellow deep on one end, and I will put some red gold on the other end. There really isn't a correct amount of paint to texture paste. It just depends which colour you want. So I'll mix this. And what I'm aiming for is a little bit of a transition between the colours. I'm also aiming to not spread it out all over. So I'm trying always to mix back towards the centre. So that's where I want to start. It will enable me to pick up from both of those poles at the same time, so that I can get some lovely grading of colour. Might just mix up a blue one too while I'm here, because I do want those greens that will develop when the red gold and the turquoise mix. So this time I need to put in some white all the way along, because one of the things with acrylic paint is it will always dry a little bit darker. And the phthalo turquoise that I plan to add to this dries very dark indeed. So I'll have just a little bit down that end and a big bit down there. Mix that up and then come down here. And that's nice, I like that. But do I want a little bit darker? I think I do. Maybe I'll just pop a little bit of Payne's grey in this end as well. I call these loaded blends, because it's a bit like the way you load a brush in folk art, and it gives you a different stroke depending how the brush is loaded. There we go. That's enough to get started with stenciling. Okay, stenciling time. Now I've selected this particular stencil because I just like the way it looks. And I'm going to pay attention because the underwing here is orange and the back of the wing here is blue, so I don't want to mix that up. And I rather like the way that this stencil kind of explodes outward. So I think I'm just going to put it there. I'm going to pick up some yellow and some red gold all at the same time, and I'm going to make sure I hold my stencil still so that I can come in here and I can pick up the first part of that shape. And then when I lift my stencil, I've got all kinds of gorgeous going on. Now I need that to continue into there a little bit more, so I'll pick up just some red gold this time. And it doesn't much matter that I'm putting the stencil down on top of places I've already been. You want it to be interesting and loose. You don't have to be careful about those things. So that's nice, I like that. So I'll dump that stencil in my handy bucket of water, and I think I'll swap over to the blue now. I find this stencil quite useful because it's got all this lovely flowy stuff on it. So I'll start out there, and I'm just holding that up because I don't really want that all over the back of it. Again, hold my stencil still and try and do this with the minimum movement that you can. Don't be using a little blade and work it lots, it's going to make a mess. So I'll just come into there and pick that up, and then I'll replace it and let it come there, I think. Oh, so pretty. Lots more stenciling to do. You'll be able to watch me do that. Okay, I'm going to swap stencils now and have a finer one for the head of the bird. And I'll swap knives too and have a littler knife, a little fine one. As you drag the knife, let it roll. So start with it sideways and then roll it as you go, because that's how you'll push the texture paste down. Now move that down here. I'm just going to go right over where the bird's eye is, because that's too hard. But then I do need it to be flat there, so I'll just use this highly technical bit of equipment here on the end of my hand and make sure that's flattened out in the general area. And I'll just tidy up. I actually kind of like that. It's like a little fluffy feather, so I might leave it alone. I'll just take the worst of the blue off there. I do want a little bit as I change my colour and come in and get some of these finer feathers happening down here as well. So mainly yellow first, and then I'll pick up some red gold. Good to let your colours have a conversation with each other as you're doing this. It's just a more interesting way of working. Wow, that's nice. Maybe just a little more, what have we got? A little more yellow, I think, down there, but I'll swap back to my bigger knife. If you mix up too much texture paste, it'll keep. You can pop it inside a clip lock sandwich bag and it'll keep for weeks. Yes, I like that. I was planning to do a whole lot more, but you know what? I'm liking that. I'm thinking I'll switch over and start doing some feathers next. And maybe this might be enough stenciling. There's feathers to come, there's combing to come, lots more happening with texture paste. It's exciting! Combs are a thing that I use all the time. You can buy combs from hardware shops and the like, but they tend to be quite regular. I prefer to make my own, and I like to make them with just some plastic. This is packaging material out of X-ray films, but the lid of an ice cream container will work just as well. So just cutting myself a rectangle, and now I'm going to take some pieces out of it. And I want to be irregular with that. So I want to come down and remove these little triangles, and I want to leave a big gap, and then I want to leave a small gap. And you'll notice that I'm making these tops flat. I'm not having points at the top. That's important. And there is a finished comb. So you see it's irregular, it's got flat bits. If you muck that up and give it points, just give it a little haircut all the way across the top to make them flat on the top. There's a comb. Okay, I have my two combs here. Here's one I prepared earlier that's a little bit finer. It's really good to have different sizes of combs. Now I need to mix up some texture paste so that I have some goo to show you how to do it. If you like icing cakes, you'll love texture paste. Or maybe that's just me. So some cobalt turquoise light and some phthalo turquoise. And a little bit of white down at this end as well. I always like to have lots of varied colour on my palette. It makes it that much more interesting when you're stretching and rolling the paint all around on your painting. Lyrical passages of colour, it's what I'm all about. So, if I get myself a smaller knife, I think a nice skinny one like this might be the way to go. And what I'm wanting to do is develop some of this movement that's happening from the bird. Okay, so load up the knife, and as you bring it down, roll. So you're coming in, rolling like that. See how I'm really pulling with my whole arm, not trying to just use my little dainty hand muscles? Again, load it and roll. See how I've allowed this to widen comparative to that point there? That's just a lyrical thing. So once I've got those down, and maybe a little one not quite in the centre, then I can get my combs. This is the one that you saw me cut. Here's a finer one that I prepared earlier. I'll use the coarser one, I think. And that needs to come down, and with a simple curve, not a compound curve, I'm corrupting that texture paste. So it's not so chunky and mechanical on there. That's one. Might even come in with a bigger blade, I think. A fatter blade. The shape of your knife makes a heck of a difference. So here I might come all the way down here. Same thing, start with the knife flat and bring it across. And then with the coarse comb, bring it down. And something I also like to do is just use the goo that's left on the comb to suggest some movement in there. The idea of where it is, where it was, where it will be, or the notion of pentimenta. You know how in cartoon drawings, if an arm is coming up, there'll be little lines underneath that show you that? Same kind of thing. So I'll continue with that and do some more. I call them flight trails, but you know, that's a made up word. You've probably noticed there's a few of those in my vocabulary. Always simple curves. A C curve, not an S curve. And maybe one up here too, I think. Actually, if I go this way, I can run in to that wing a little bit. And why not? Making some edges lost and some edges found is part of the beauty of expressive painting. Okay, that's enough combing. Going to do some feathers now. I need a little more texture paste. You go through oodles of this stuff. When I was just working out how to play with texture paste, I said to my partner Graham, oh, if only I had big puddles of colour, I really want to cut loose with this texture. And he just looked at me with a bemused face and said, well, mix up some big puddles of colour. Seriously? Why didn't I think of that for myself? So a little more white there. Now, I'm going to start with this whopping knife to do the very biggest, what are they called? Feathers. So pick up mainly white, make sure there's a nice fat roll of colour along the edge of the blade there. And then I need to come in, and you always start at the outside edge of the wing. And I want to make sure that there's a roll on the top side of the wing. So I'll start with this feather here, pop the knife down, bed it down, give it a little wiggle to start that, and then take it to one side, roll it over and pull it down. Same thing, but overlapping a little bit so that I get that big fat roll like that. And another one. And see how nicely the colour plays in there, how it pulls. So while I have this great big knife in my hand, I'll do the top 3 feathers on this other wing as well. And it will necessarily come through this flight trail. That's okay. So, got a few dodgy edges there where it's developed a bit of an extra shape that I don't particularly want. So I'll just come in and restate that with a smaller knife. And I'll do it on this one too. Again, rolling as I come down. The texture paste loses about 30% of its volume as it dries. So don't worry that you're making big lumpy stuff. It's okay, it comes down a bit. And in any case, you do want this kind of mark making. If the buyer of your painting has a textured painting on their wall, their friends will know for sure that it's not a print. I'm sure everyone will be happy about that. That they have the one and only original. So, smaller knife, because the size of the blade has an impact, of course, on the size of the feather that you're making. But same thing, roll it over to the side and pull it in like that. See how I'm using both hands here? And I'm trying really hard to be steady with what I'm doing. I often use my little fingers to prop my hands on the canvas. That can have a downside because I do sometimes get my fingers down into wet texture paste. Do you see how I'm locating myself along this charcoal line that I drew earlier? Thinking I want to bring some depth of colour in there, and maybe I could bring some burnt umber, but I'm actually thinking I might pull some Payne's grey in there to tuck that wing behind this one in front. So I need to get myself some Payne's grey and continue, don't I? But I'll keep going with this and leave a gap for my Payne's grey feathers. And I'll just use up the last bit of this. Texture paste will keep in clip-lock bags really well for quite a number of weeks. So don't ever worry about mixing up too much. You can preserve it. And it doesn't matter where my stroke runs out of paint. It's okay. There's so much more. There's other layers of feathers happening in here. There's so much more to happen. So long as you just bring it down to a smoothish edge, you're cool. That's the end of that texture paste. Better mix up some more. Best I clean my knife before I dig out some more texture paste. There are those that will tell you, why don't you use some nice, I forget what it's called, gap filler, some water-based gap filler from the hardware shop, which is cheaper than texture paste. And I'll tell you why. You don't use that because that stuff is designed to stick to your house, to fix things on your house. And so it's got some very aggressive chemical hooks in there. And that's fine if it's on your house, but if it's on your beautiful canvas, we don't know yet if that acidity is just going to eat its way through the canvas over time. We've got a fair idea that it will. So don't. Buy texture paste or modelling compound or whatever it's called in your neck of the woods. So I've gone with my darker colour here, and I was using that knife, so I'll continue with it. Now I don't actually want such a big jump in colour, so I'll come back into this one. And I'll come back into that one as well. It's paint, everybody. You're the boss of it. Just do what you think is a fair thing. Don't let fear limit you. I can hear a plane going overhead. Who'd be off on holidays if they could be painting, really? Some people. Okay, smaller marks as I come in there because that's going to disappear behind that edge. And then very much the same thing, I'm keeping to the direction that I established with my charcoal lines before. Just checking how they get shorter and fatter down here. So I might go back to my thicker knife for back there, down there. One more. And then there's a feather here that sits in front of the wing there. And there's one of those on this other wing as well. And still got some Payne's grey left, so I'll use it to develop the tail feathers. Again, using this little fat knife. Okay, we have feathers. I'll be continuing with yellow feathers as well. Probably not much more on this wing, maybe even a little more pattern there. But let the painting speak to you. As it develops, listen to it. Listen to what it's wanting to become. some marks are best left out. We're not working with photorealism here, we're working with expression. So not every part of the bird is going to be as developed as every other part. That's where you, the artist, bring your specialness into the process. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. This mix is acrylamide yellow deep and red gold on my favourite little leaf shaped blade. So here, I'm just making sure I get enough of an edge along here for the belly of the bird, and then making sure it's straight as well. For smaller feathers, you don't want to be so precise as you were with big ones. Okay, now that can dry, because I'm always a little concerned that I'm going to be working on top of wet texture paste. It's good where you want to consolidate your edges, but if you're not wanting to do that, it's better to avoid the whole putting your hands down into wet texture paste or getting it all over your shirt department as well. So this will need to dry again, and then I'll keep on going. See you in a bit. Okay, all of the texture is dry now, and so we can continue. What we have to do is make sure that we're on the right track here, and you can use a special thing to troubleshoot where you're going, because I know it's difficult to believe, but your painting can actually only be wrong in 4 places. And those 4 places are line, tone, colour and edge. 4, count them. So line is your initial drawing. It's matters of composition and your initial drawing. Because we planned it, because we took all the trouble of making viewfinders around it, because we thought about locating the main area of interest in one of our hotspots, because of all of that work we did earlier, there are no line errors. It's a well-drawn bird, it looks like the bird in question, and it's in the right place at the right size on this canvas. So line, tick, we don't have to go there. Next is tone. Tone is all about lightness and darkness. So we've got some extreme lights, we have some extreme darks. Maybe it needs a little bit of balancing, and I think perhaps I'll want to include a little bit more light down here, because glazing is one of the things we're getting up to now, and glazing can only darken. You can't lighten with glazes without getting a sort of chalky veiled look, which can be useful, but I'm not a massive fan of it. So we have to assess tone, line and tone. Next comes colour. Colour is all about colour temperature and colour theory. So that's about assessing what's happening now, seeing where we can expand the range of colours so that it gets a little bit more exciting than just the complementary contrast of blue and orange, which is basically all we have at the moment. And edge. Edge is all about lost edges and found edges, hard edges and soft edges. It's about things like, we can see very clearly here the contrast between the dark feather and the light behind, but here where the bird's body kind of disappears into the background there, that's a lost edge. So a found or a hard edge and a lost or a soft edge. So we'll go through and sort that out. It'll challenge you, but it's where to go with your paintings. When you're at this sort of halfway stage, you need to troubleshoot, get firm with yourself about what's right and what's wrong. Okay, first, line. I already discussed that there's not really any line errors here. It's a great drawing, it's in the right spot. However, we do have to think about composition a little bit. So there's light here and there's nothing much to balance it down here. So I think I might just add in with a little bit of titanium white and my trusty friend, the fan brush. I'll add a little water to it because you don't want the paint grabby for this. You want to be able to get it moving. And I want to think about the idea that this line would come down, not there. Looks like the bird did a poo right there. We don't want that. Would come down here and then come into this space here. Good trick to just pop your canvas up on the very front edge of your easel if you have a little lip there that stops your canvas falling off, because you really want to be able to bring that stroke through. So I'll just do what's called a draw through so that I know I'm coming down here like this, but then I don't start to see it till it comes to there. So I've made that mark. Now I just want to widen it a little bit. I tend always to have a mark smaller in the middle of the painting here and then become broader as it gets to the outer edge of the canvas. That looks a little bit clunky, so I might just add one out here too. That's better, that's sitting nicely now. And I'm finding this a little bit solid blue up here, so I'll come in and just add some light fan brushes are fabulous because you don't always get the mark you're expecting to get, and that looseness can enliven your paintings quite marvellously. And here, just a little bit here too, I think. Okay, so I'm happy now with that composition, with where it's gone. Always, when you're working with acrylics, pop your brushes straight down into water. You don't want paint drying on that. So, line errors, all sorted. Good thing we did all that planning in the first place. Now I'm looking for tone errors. And one of the things I notice is that there's some lightness on the wings here of the bird that I haven't managed to catch. So in the spirit of always making sure I get enough lightness in at this early stage, I have some Naples yellow and I have a flat brush. So a flat, that's a type of brush. It's called that because it has a flat ferrule. The metal of it is squished flat and it has a flat haircut as well. And I don't want to add water to my paint this time. I'm just using it straight as it comes out of the tube, Naples yellow, and all I want to do with it is just dry brush across where some of this needs to be a bit lighter. And I have a textured surface here. So because my brush is dry and a little bit stiff, it's going to just catch the tips of those textures. I'm not trying to push it down between. So it needs to have a little bit more light there. I want to just catch the tips of these wings as well. And down here into the body too, there's some light comes down. You'll notice when you're working with acrylic that where your brush is fully loaded, the first stroke that you make is the most intense. It has the most colour. So always start your stroke where you want it to be strongest. Nearly there. And I think that's enough light on the bird. Maybe I want a little of this colour into the background as well. So might change back to my trusty fan brush. And add a little water to the paint so that I can just come in here. We're always looking for unity in a painting, to have the colours in one place reflected in other areas of the painting. So that's what I'm about now, is just making sure that I don't tell a separate story in the object and the background. Those stories have things in common. Maybe just here, that's a little bit clunky, that shape. And maybe just a little more here. That's it. So we've sorted out the line errors and we've sorted out the tone errors. We have enough lightness and darkness and balance now. There'll be some fine painting comes in a little bit later on, but we're ready now to talk about colour errors next. Okay, here's my friend the colour wheel. I used to be so high-minded about using colour wheels. I thought, come on Dee, you've been painting for a terribly long time. Surely you do not need a colour wheel anymore. You can just do this by instinct. This was nonsense, people. I was being pretty righteous about it. I've discovered that using a colour wheel means I'm still working instinctively. I'm still building on everything I know about painting, but it stops me spending so much time faffing about making errors of colour judgment. Colour theory is there for a reason. It makes things easier. So I would say colour wheels, very, very useful. This is the colour wheel that I made myself because I couldn't buy one that did all the things I wanted it to do. So looking at the colour wheel, I can see that the colours of this bird have given us a very simple complementary contrast colour scheme. Complementary contrast simply means that the orange of the bird is directly opposite from the blues of the bird on the colour wheel. So any two colours that are right opposite each other are called complementary contrasts, and they give you maximum punch in terms of selecting colour. However, I think complementary contrast can be a little bit boring, and so I like to split one side of that contrast. So here I'm probably going to not use too many more colours from over here. I'll stick to just within this colour family here. So that might take me into some burnt sienna. It's essentially orange plus black gives you burnt sienna, because all of these colours around the outside of the wheel are this biggest part of the colour wheel with black added to each of those colours. All the colours on the inside are the main hue with white added to it. That's how a colour wheel works. So I might introduce some burnt sienna, but the big story is that I'll come across my colour wheel to the blues. So I have both cool blue, which is generally phthalo blue or Prussian blue. They're both cools. There's a handy little list of cool blues right here. And warm blue. The warm blues are French ultramarine and cobalt. And so, as well as the blues that I already have in my picture, I'm going to push that sideways and include some more purplish blues and also include some more greenish blues, so that I will end up with basically, like I have here, some colours from one side of the colour wheel and then an extended range from the other side of the colour wheel. I think that's going to work really, really nicely. So that will correct our, well, they're not really errors. There's not really colour errors here. It's just not nearly exciting enough. So we're going to be using glaze to add all of these other colours in there, and glaze will also help us to address any edge things that we need to sort out. Haven't really talked about edge yet, but I will when we get there. We'll have to mix up some glazes now to get going. The tricky question of glazing. The product that I like to use for glazing is Jo Sonja's clear glaze medium. There are many different brands. Depending where you live in the world, you'll have options. Do read the fine print on your chosen product, because what you want is for it to be suitable for glazing techniques. Those are the magic words. And you also don't want it to be super glossy. I find glossy a little bit distracting, particularly at this early stage of the proceedings. Glaze works by bringing your paint down. It extends the paint and enables it to be more like a pane of coloured glass over top of what you have already done. It doesn't obscure what's underneath, but it enhances it. It can change the colour temperature. It is the thing I use that develops wonderful lyrical passages of colour where all the colours work together, because they're all made out of what is underneath combined with what is on top. Something else you need to know about glazing, as well as to use a glaze medium, is about the transparency of paint. So see this little solid circle right there, and this little half and half circle right there, and this little empty circle. The empty circle tells me that this tube of paint, phthalo green, is a transparent colour. It is see-through. This little filled in circle tells me that titanium white, along with Naples yellow, is completely opaque. It will cover what it goes on top of. And of course, the one in the middle, that's half solid and half empty, is a semi-transparent colour. You will find that opaque colours really don't work very nicely in glazes. That's one of the reasons to buy a good quality artist's paint, because you'll find in the cheaper ranges nearly all of the colours are opaque, and my work is predicated upon using transparent colours. So, colours we mentioned earlier, we're sticking with the idea of our colour theory, extending the orange range into burnt sienna. So I have some red gold, which is a fully transparent colour, and some burnt sienna, which is a semi, so that's okay. Have those two. I have, to make my purplish blues, I have French ultramarine and dioxazine purple. Dioxazine purple is another transparent. French ultramarine is a semi-transparent. That's going to work for me. And I also have phthalo turquoise and phthalo green, both of which are completely transparent. This little range here is pretty much my favourite range for glazing, particularly red gold, and I use Payne's grey an awful lot too because it's a very transparent colour and it's just beautiful. It works deliciously with all kinds of things. One of my favourite shadow ranges is these two, dioxazine purple and burnt sienna together. So that's what you need to know about what we're going to be glazing with. I suppose I should show you how to mix it up next, shouldn't I? Here's my glaze medium. I prefer to mix my paints in china saucers, and they have to be white, and you'll see why in just a minute. So I think I might start with phthalo green, and I'm just going to put about a pea-sized lump of paint on the side of my dish, and I'm going to combine that with about a tablespoon of glaze medium in the bottom of my dish. The reason you do it like that is because you need to be able to pull down just a little bit of colour into the glaze so that you don't overwhelm it. If you just put the paint in the bottom of the dish as well, you'll end up with a whole bucket of glaze that's maybe not the colour you need that much of. So this is the way that I've found to do it. Now the thing about glaze is it looks a little bit scary in the dish. That looks like a pretty bright colour. But if I put it on here, see how you can hardly see that? One of the good things about glaze is when you do it, if you decide you don't like that bit, you can just wipe it off. I love that. How can you be brave if there is no Control Z? So more colour into it. Now it's important that I can still see the bottom of the dish through what I'm doing here. So I'm thinking that looks pretty right in terms of intensity of colour. How about I make a big mess here just to show you how I normally work. So with this, I'm going to come through, and because it's transparent, I'm going to make sure I ring the changes with where I put it. So when I put it in here, I'm going to make sure that I put it not only over some of that blue, but that it also goes over some of the white and over some of the yellow that's underneath. And I'm going to pull it right back into that wing, and then I'm going to grab one of these combs that we were using earlier, and I'm going to comb it like that. So when you're combing, every time you comb, clean your comb off. So, okay, just going to go a little bit nuts here with this. Fan brushes. Gotta love a fan brush. It lets you twist it and turn it and make your mark change. Let it go from quite broad into quite narrow. When you're combing, have a simple curve. Don't come in and do this kind of thing. It looks terrible. So just bring it back a simple mark. Now some of this, don't want to put it all just where the blue bits are. Looking at my bird, I've got some darkness in there. This is all light, but I don't want it to be all the same. So I'll push some glaze in there and let that feather out. And I want to make sure that's going to be a lost edge. Oh, here's a thing I forgot to do. Here's a cautionary tale. Do come in and get those charcoal marks off, because if you glaze on top of them, you'll be so stuck with them. Of course, that's another story. You can deliberately do charcoal drawing and seal it into the surface and work with it. But I'll show you how to do that another time. Okay, charcoal be gone. Just fix that. Okay, now that's fairly solid. I think I might just want one more green one into here. And maybe for variety, I won't even comb that. I'll just come in and push it here, straight over top of that white. Okay, I'm not going to wash that dish up just yet, because I might want it again. But I want to come in now with a different colour. So I might combine a little French ultramarine and a little Diox purple in there. If you're used to working with oil paint, you're probably in quite a bad habit of not putting your lids on straight away every time. Don't do that. With acrylics, all your tubes of paint will dry up. So a little bit of purple down into there, but I'll pull it a bit closer back to the blue side because I'm respecting the rules of colour theory, and I didn't want to expand my range all the way around there to purple. I'm keeping it quite tight. So I'm keeping it in this range. True purple's out of the story, but I can have a warm blue, that's okay. So a little bit more blue into it. That's looking a little intense. That's better. Okay, so with my warm blue, I can come in. What have I got to play with? I might pull in a little bit of a connection coming in here. Just to feather that up a bit. It's a little bit solid, and I'll come in solidly there and then soften it out. Don't think I want to comb there. If I put this bluey purple over that very dark thing there, it'll look great while it's wet, but when it dries you won't be able to see it at all, so I'm not going to waste my product. Now, more playing. I love these flight trails, this idea of where the bird was, where the bird is, where the bird will be. I think I want to come into the middle of this green here and let them have a chat to each other. The purpley blue and the green together will give me much more of a true blue. I like that. I think I'll pull in a bit there to just modify the shape of the head. Get something interesting going on here. So see how the glaze is responding to my textured surface, and I'm allowing it to skip over bits. Seriously, I love this stuff. Don't want this one to look too plain, don't want it to feel left out. I might just pull it all the way in so that it interacts with that. See how the glaze is knocking off on the textured surface? That's why you put textures in to start with, so that you can have that reaction between the things. I'm liking that. I think I've got quite a ways to go with glaze though, so I'll keep going. In a minute. I've had this out in the sun to dry. It's important that I let it dry between this step and this next step, because here I was using these colours. I was using dioxazine purple, phthalo turquoise and phthalo green. Those colours sit here on the colour wheel, and so they won't make mud. No matter how I mix those together, they won't make anything hideous. However, I'm coming over to this side of the colour wheel today and I'm using some colours from this part of the colour wheel. If I did this mixed with this, wouldn't be a happy result at all, it'd be hideous. When colours sit close together on the colour wheel, they're called analogous colours, and it tells you that just here on our Arts Tree colour wheel. So instead of these analogous colours, I'm popping over to the other side of the colour wheel and having these analogous colours. I have burnt sienna, raw sienna dark and red gold. Red gold is a personal favourite because it's so beautifully transparent. These guys are semi-transparent, so although that's not completely ideal for glazing, it'll do. So away with them and out with some new sources. So red gold into one, again a pea-sized lump of paint, raw sienna dark into another, and burnt sienna into the third. As always, up on the edge of the dish. And about a tablespoon of glaze in each one. It's really useful to have a separate brush for each colour. I love fan brushes, they work for me. So the first one I'm going with is my raw sienna dark, because I'm quite aware that I've got a whole bunch of pretty bright colour happening here, and to make bright colour be more beautiful, more vivid, more vibrant, you need some neutrals to set off against it, and raw sienna dark is going to do that for me. So I've created this lovely swoop in here, and I think I'd like to oppose that and knock out just a little bit of this white. So push it out in this direction and make sure I use it not just over the white, but over some of this background too. The details like the beak and the eye we'll be putting in last. Don't worry too much about them right now. So there, this is a bit nothingy, this area, so I might just swoop in there as well. And of course, bearing in mind the notion that we want our canvas to be integrated across the whole distance of it, might get some of it in, or let's say here. I'm sure I look exactly like I know what I'm doing here, but really I'm just making stuff up. Don't tell anybody. It's acrylic paint. If you muck it up, you just paint over it. It's the most wonderful stuff in the world. Okay, that's enough raw sienna dark for the minute. Now, red gold. Red gold is going to be so useful because there's a lot of it in the body of the bird already, and I'll be able to make sure I keep this edge lost. Big fan of a lost edge. So here, I think I'll pull right in there. And I think I might pull in there as well. The beautiful thing with glazes is that even though here I'm putting orange over top of blue, it's not going to make mud because the colours can't combine. The blue is dry underneath. So what you're getting is a visual combination of those colours rather than an actual mix, because that wouldn't be pretty at all. I'm liking where that's going. I think perhaps a little dash of orange in there. Red gold, I should call it its proper name, shouldn't I? And I might just combine this a little bit too, I think. At this kind of stage, painting always feels like a dance to me, that I'm sort of going, come on, come to me, you know you want to, and I'm making hundreds and hundreds of decisions. Not all of them are going to be right all the time, and that's okay, because I'll get other chances to fix things. I'm aiming for a beautiful symphony of colour that will come together. Sometimes I don't know where to go with it, and I leave it, come away the next day, come back, make other decisions. I'm going to keep going with this. To see what I'm doing, I think I need to get it up on an easel now. Being able to step back and have a look at what you've done is a very, very important thing. All right, this is just some burnt sienna here. Again, it's a transparent colour, my favourites. And it's a neutral too. So I want to just pull in a little bit of sanity. I'm thinking that colour's a little intense. So a bit more glazed medium. That's better. The glazed medium appears milky while it's wet, but that goes away as it dries. It'll all become much more clear, much more translucent. So the bird is the focus. It has to sit forward. So I might just bring in a few more darker tones. Might comb that one, I think. Oh, yeah. This corner's a bit busy, so I'll calm it down. I'm allowing the glaze to just pick up on those textures there. I'm all for interesting. I like messy, but I like interesting more. one of the hard things about painting in this way is you really can't see where you're headed until you get there. And for a lot of painters, that's really challenging. I'm thinking I also want some Payne's grey because I need to be able to push some things away. So dark colours push things away. Dark and cool colours push things away, and warm and light colours bring things closer. As a general rule. There's exceptions, of course. If you're talking about the horizon, it actually gets lighter the further away it goes, but that's because of atmospheric perspective. That's all the dust in the air. We're close enough to this bird that there is no dust between us and it. Payne's grey is another one of those gorgeous transparent colours. So I'll use it. I like this pattern in here, but I want to unify it a bit more. So I'll hold the brush down flattish so that I'm causing the glaze to get sort of wiped off on the texture. And here, I'm not liking that bit at all. So maybe on the bird there's actually a bit of a soft shape coming up there. That's better, that's got a bit more movement in it. And this dark tail here, I think I'd like to bring right down. Do you see how with these strokes I'm trying to use my whole body. I'm trying to not use the tiny little muscles of my fingers and thumb, but trying to work my way in using the whole strength of my body to make the mark. Sometimes the first instance of any colour that you put on looks dreadful because it's just there. It's like a pimple on a pumpkin. And a lot of people panic at that point. But instead of panicking and wiping that off, you go, okay, it looks really bad, it looks bald and horrible and too much. Put another few instances on first, and if you still hate it then you're allowed to wipe it off. Remember, you're being brave here. I've just swapped over to the comb with bigger teeth. This is the one I have been using. This is the one I've got now. I'm thinking that might be pretty close to enough glazing now. Glazing doesn't have to be your final layer, but it's good for it to be towards the end. But I'm actually thinking that these patterns I put in here, they might need some balancing down here, or maybe I need to balance that with a bit of darker spatter. So I need to think about that one for a little while, and then I'll come in and... So this is the part I love. This is the part where you're pulling it together, where you're asking it to come to you and respecting what's happened on the canvas rather than enforcing your idea that you had in the beginning of where you wanted this painting to go. This is the really fun bit. We are on the home stretch. About time, I hear you say. We've been using fan brushes because I love a good fan brush. It gives you a mark that sometimes you don't expect. You don't know what you're getting, and I like that surprise and that looseness. Now, however, We need some detail. We're going to use different brushes. This brush is a dagger brush, so called because it is shaped kind of like a dagger. I have a larger one and I have a smaller one as well. These brushes are called liners or riggers, so called because they were designed to paint the rigging on sailing ships. They have very long bristles in the brush that absorb the shake out of your hand, so you have a greater chance of doing a clean, tidy line with them. These little ones here have longer bristles for the same reason, but they're just really flats. They have a flat squashed ferrule and they have a flat haircut. They're just a little bit longer. I don't actually know that they have a specific name. I just found them and went, yeah, I'll have some of those. I have also a tiny, tiny little thing that will enable me to make just little marks. So that's the brushes that I have. I'll need a palette knife as well, because I just realised there's some things I forgot about this bird's face. We're just going to be using flat paint, so we don't have to use texture paste in most of this. We won't be putting glaze in it. For a lot of what we're doing, we will just use paint straight out of the tubes mixed into the colours that we want. So let's get busy with that, shall we? Here's some I prepared earlier. I just have some texture paste mixed with cobalt turquoise light and titanium white, a little bit of acrylamide yellow deep and some naphthol red light in there as well. I thought, having told you just 2 seconds ago that we wouldn't be using texture paste, we'd just be using flat paint, I thought I'd confuse you by using some texture paste anyway. We'll be mainly using flat paint, but remember those bits I mentioned that I forgot about? There's a little flash of white feathers and a little flash of orange feathers there that I forgot all about. So I'll just pop those in now, shall I? So I'm going to pick up some of the red and some of the yellow on the same blade at the same time, so that when I do that, I've got some colour to play with. So I can then just pull those feathers, and it's going to look a bit more feathery because there's colour playing in there. It's not just a flat area of colour. I'll just pull that out with the point of my blade, and then I'll pick up a little white because I need this feather here too. And I'll tuck that in. And on this one, the ends of the feathers are down here. And maybe just a little more. That's better. Can't forget those important bits, can I? So, something that we need to think about is edges and elements. The element is the bird, and one of the things that we need to be able to do is see the edges a little bit more. I don't want the bird to be completely lost into that background. So here, I'll just pick up a little bit of yellow, and I need to just pull that edge a little more. And here, just pull that edge a little more. And see how the bird's just starting to emerge now out of that background. I think here where I allowed the red gold glaze to go over top of the turquoise, I think I'd like to put some of that turquoise back. And I'm liking that. And this texture has largely disappeared, so I'll just drag across the top of it with my cobalt turquoise light and texture paste. See how beautifully those stencils work for me? And here I'm still not happy with this bit. And the bird's starting to sit together much better. Might just pop in there too, I think, with maybe a little white, I think. So when you get to this stage, you're making stuff up. You're imagining what you think is going to look wonderful on there, and you do it. And if you hate it, you wipe it off again. But be brave, remember? And I think just a little of this in here to really pull that out. So see, I've found quite a few things in there now that were lost. Now it's time to get out my little brushes, because I have a beak to paint and an eye, and texture paste and knives are a little bit too clumsy for that. Okay, we're nearly done. I'm a little bit excited. Do you notice how only now we're getting to the point where we're painting elements, the things that we can see? Before you knew about all this layering stuff, I'm pretty sure that you would have just come in and started painting a bird first. But isn't it magical and wonderful how the bird's almost been painted for us? I think that's one of my favourite things about painting, is the things that do themselves. So all I have here, I have my smallest flat brush and I have some Payne's grey. I'm adding just a little water to it, just a brushful, to make it just work nicely for me. It gets a little bit sticky. If you can ever feel your brush dragging on the surface, that tells you need to loosen your acrylic paint with a little water. So I'm going to paint very carefully. And one thing that I notice looking at my resource image is that the dark colour on the beak is not as dark just there. So if I start down this end and let my line go soft as the brush runs out of paint, and then I start down this end, and again let my stroke go soft as the brush runs out of paint, I'll end up with a naturally light area there where the background colour is coming through. And allowing little bits of the background colour to come through really helps to unify your painting. Get the division of the beak in. Now, need to think about an eye, and the eye sits down fairly tight on here. That looks about in the right spot. So I'll just paint it Payne's grey first, and then I'll worry about adding some lighting to it in a moment. So I have an eye in there. I'll have a little bit of structure around the eye, the muscles that hold it in place. That's enough for the moment. And then I need to paint the lower beak. So I'll pinch some of this. This has got some texture paste in it, this orange, but it doesn't matter. A bit more water in it, it'll be fine, it'll behave. And here, that colour goes pretty much across the entire beak first. You see how I'm resting my wrist on the canvas there? That's because if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to paint a straight line. So that'll sit in there. Then I'll pick up a little of this yellow to bring in a bit more lightness there. I always want to vary my colours whenever I can. And then where it gets darker in there, there's actually some turquoise feathers in that part. So I'll try and keep that a little bit light, a little bit see-through in there. I'll use the turquoise too to just find above the eye there and to just find that front part of the head. It's looking pretty good. I'll grab my dagger brush now. Always dampen your brush when you're working with acrylic paint because acrylic paint likes a wet brush. And here I just need to have some soft mark making down that just captures those textures. Oh, look at that. I picked up some yellow too and it went green. I rather like that. I'll keep that. One of the things that's beautiful with a dagger brush is I can start with a very fine line and then press down on it to thicken it up. I like it. Now I'll have my tiny, tiny brush, again with some of this cobalt turquoise light. And I need to just find where the light is coming into that eye. And then I'll clean my brush and just pull that little bit of paint out like the spokes on a bicycle wheel. And then with a tiny touch of white, make sure that the bird looks alive by giving it a glossy, shiny eye. From this point on, you can keep going forever, really, finding things that you don't like and perfecting it. But what you don't want is to perfect the life out of it. You want some accidents to stay there. You want some nice loose parts where more neutral colours are showing up. You want it to feel like a bird in flight. It doesn't matter that not all of the detail is there. It doesn't matter that this bird has no feet at all. You have to decide for yourself, as the artist, the parts that are important and the parts that are not. And for me, that's it. That's full of joy. That's nice and lively. I'd probably like to let it dry, sit for a week or so, somewhere where I can see it, so that if there's anything that annoys me, I can come in and fix it. But that's it. We're done. I've painted bravely. I'll bet you're just busting to do it too. You can. It's awesome fun. See you for the next exciting thing we're going to do. Bye.